I'm going to do harm to a flight attendant, then I think that the cockpit crews were trained to open the door and say, "Where do you want to go?"
Francis says pilots were not trained to deal with or even consider hijackers on a suicide mission. Which brings us to another assumption, that airspace over key Washington sites is protected, that any plane approaching the Pentagon or White House would be shot down. 2 days ago, we learned just how false that is.
When you look at the location of National Airport, the practical feasibility of doing that and making a decision that you're going to do that would seem to me to be almost impossible.
What Francis is talking about is that the flight path in and out of Washington's in-town airport runs right past the Pentagon and less than a mile from the White House. Planes violate their airspace routinely. There have long been unconfirmed reports that there are anti-aircraft Stinger missiles on the roof of the White House. But when a disturbed man crashed a small plane on the South Lawn there in 1994, no one fired. Aviation experts say up to now, this country has not had the will or the practical capability to shoot down a commercial airliner on a sneak attack.
You didn't have fighter jets sitting at the end of runways at Andrews or at National or at Dulles, ready and armed with the pilots in the cockpit to do that.
Some countries already have that attitude. Israel has never had a successful terrorist attack on its national airline, El Al. Terrorism expert Frank Salufo says the answer is government control.
The main difference, yes, is that they are government run and the government pays for security, and here they're not.
Travelers on El Al have to be a lot more patient than Americans are used to. Passengers must arrive 2 hours before their flights and undergo a detailed interrogation and a thorough search of their bags. And on some foreign airlines, the pilots in the cockpit are armed.
That is a full war setting. We're not and haven't been in that position.
At least until Tuesday.
At least until Tuesday.
The consensus among experts we talked with today is that the FAA's new security measures are not enough, that the government is going to have to get even tougher to ensure the safety of air travel. Peter?
Thanks very much, Chris Wallace. Very helpful, very informative report. And in just a moment, we're going to talk to the Deputy Director of the U.S. Marshal Service about what may be entailed in terms of onboard security. But first, let's go to Lisa Stark, who's been covering aviation in very general and specific terms for us from Seattle, not yet able to return to Washington, her standard base. Lisa, first of all, I want to know whether or not you in the aviation community have picked up the report of John Miller today that other people have been detained at Kennedy and LaGuardia, and that, among other things, that is the reason those airports are now closed again.
Absolutely. We understand that the reason that all 3 New York airports are closed, we believe Newark Airport is also shut down tonight, even though there was not an incident there that we are aware of. But those airports were shut down after these individuals were arrested. The FAA wanted to take no chances, and they closed those airports after that happened.
In fact, Newark is closed down, to confirm it for you for a change.
Good, thank you.
What's the general state of aviation in the country?
The general state of aviation in the country is that it is moving at a snail's pace. We understand, Peter, from the FAA that there were about 250 commercial flights that took off and landed today in the United States. To give you some perspective, that's about 1% of what you would normally expect on any given day in the U.S. There were about 3,000 flights total, but the others were made up of military flights, medevac flights, law enforcement, those sorts of flights. Only 250 commercial planes actually took off and landed today. We also understand, in addition to the 3 airports being closed in the New York area, we reported earlier that Washington National Airport is closed, and it will remain closed for the time being. You heard in that previous report how close it is to key government buildings. That is why we understand now that the FAA and the Airport Authority has decided that Washington National must remain closed at this time. They indicate that they're going to try to reopen the airport as soon as they can, but no indication when that might be. So that airport stays closed as well.
These 2 incidents today at Kennedy and LaGuardia would certainly seem to justify the very stringent security which both the Attorney General and the Secretary of Transportation talked to us about today. But has there been something of a struggle in the aviation-government relationship today about what this actually means in terms of having air traffic in the United States return to normal?
What the security means, or these incidents?
The security and the general extremely stringent security which the government wants put in place.
I think there have been a lot of disagreements and discussions over the last few days about what security measures need to be in place. And to be honest with you, those discussions continue, and I'm sure they have intensified given what has happened at Kennedy and LaGuardia Airport. We know that the airlines are still pushing for a number of other steps, including a federalization of all of the security. In other words, that the government would take over security at the airport. They would like a ramping up of the Sky Marshal program. So these discussions are still underway. And I think Secretary Norm Mineta indicated today when he talked about air travel that there are still discussions underway and that there may be additional steps and that we have lessons, he said, to learn from Tuesday. So I don't think this is the end of it, and we may see additional security measures yet.
Lisa, thanks very much indeed. Lisa Stark in Seattle, and you've led us directly to our next guest. We're joined in our Washington bureau by Donald Gambatiza, who is the deputy. Do I pronounce your name correctly, sir?
It's Gambatiza.
Gambatiza, my apologies. Donald Gambatiza, who's the Deputy Director of the U.S. Marshal Service. Can you comment first, please, on the efficiency of the need you think there may be for a Sky Marshals program, which means putting armed agents on civilian aircraft, either in uniform or not?
Well, Mr. Jennings, first of all, I'd like to say on behalf of the men and women of the Marshal Service that we extend our condolences to those who lost their lives in this horrific incident. As far as the Sky Marshal program, the Marshal Service was in the early 70s the beginnings of the air piracy program. That program went on for several years, and then it was taken over by the Department of Treasury. Since then, we've had no involvement in it. Obviously, there has been talk in the media of reestablishing such a program, but I'm certainly not privy to what the plans of the administration are in that area.
Are you saying there's been no talk in the government or between the government and the aviation industry about it?
I'm not aware of any, sir.
None whatsoever. No discussion of reinstituting the Marshal program.
There has been discussions about the program, but I'm unaware of any administration program that would reestablish one.
I apologize. I think I'm not making myself clear. In terms of new string, not your problem, mine. I apologize. In terms of reinstituting or reasserting the Sky Marshals program, which means putting armed marshals on board U.S. civilian aircraft, has there been discussion in the last couple of days between government and the aviation industry about the possibility of that?
I'm not aware of if there has been discussion between the government and the aviation industry.
Has there been discussion within the government?
There has been some discussion within the Department of Justice. However, I'm certainly not the one to say whether that would go forward or not.
Okay. Now, your people were at airports in the United States today. What were they doing?
Well, shortly after the attacks on our country, we were directed by the Attorney General to develop a plan to enhance the security at our airports. Together with the Border Patrol and the U.S. Customs Service, we developed a plan to do that and to increase a security presence there at those airports.
And has it been possible to do that from scratch as quickly as the Attorney General says it is required?
Yes, we were able to implement a plan very quickly to increase a security presence, and I think when the flying public arrive at their airports, when they do reopen, that they will see an increased security presence of federal agents who will be identified in some sort of uniform. So obviously the idea here is to restore confidence in the aviation system.
And did your people have any role in arresting the people at Kennedy and or LaGuardia this afternoon?
No, sir, we did not. However, the Marshal Service does take all federal prisoners into custody, and we will do that at some point.
And so in fact, you do confirm that we have been reporting that in fact there are people at least being temporarily detained and perhaps more permanently detained.
I'm certainly not, at this point, able to comment on the investigation where it stands. My understanding is there were people taken into custody.
You want to, so there's none of our reporting that you particularly want to knock down?
I haven't been briefed on any of the specifics of those arrests and how many there were.
Okay. And let me ask you the question I'm sure people all over the country are asking, people who want to go somewhere. Given what we are reporting tonight, this latest incident, and the general sense of crisis, more than a sense of crisis in the country, do you think people in the United States should feel safe flying tonight?
Certainly.
And what's the basis for your observation?